Howdy, everybody, and welcome to episode 44 of Internal Budget. As always, Brandon Maki, staff writer for Silver7Sens.com, here with you. And if I look like a dehydrated raccoon, it's because I rent in downtown Toronto, and all of a sudden, at about midnight last night, the ceiling of my bathroom started leaking. Am I annoyed? Yes. Am I sleep deprived? Yes. Am I going to complain about it? Also, yes. But that's pretty much the extent of it because today we have an amazing guest on tap for the show. He is the head coach of the ECHL's Brampton Beast, which is, of course, the Ottawa Senators affiliate. He's going to talk to us today about the cancellation of his season, which is obviously tremendously unfortunate. On top of that, prospects like Joey Daccord, Kevin Mandolese, they're all going to get his own analysis. Folks, it is the head coach of the Brampton Beast, Spiros Anastas. Please enjoy. Today on the podcast, he is the head coach of the Ottawa Senators ECHL affiliate, the Brampton Beast. It is Mr. Spiros Anastas. Sir, I understand this has been likely a challenging time for you, so thank you for jumping on. I appreciate it.
No, I appreciate being on. Thanks for having me. It definitely is a trying time with what everyone's going through right now, and also recent news of our league. But always great to talk hockey, especially when it's related to our franchise. So excited to be on.
Yeah, so walk me through what the last few weeks have been like in terms of the North Division deciding to sit this coming season out. Did you have any indication that this was going to happen, or was this something that kind of came out of the blue? What's it been like in terms of a process?
Yeah, I mean, I think the process pretty much started from the first day after the 2019-20 season was canceled, because it was right away questions about what 2020-21 would look like. Would the date be pushed back? Would we get started on time? Would there be any challenges or restrictions? So, I mean, this has been ongoing since pretty much March 16th, and at times it looked a lot more optimistic. Other times it looked a lot more grim. In the spring, we weren't sure what things would look like, and then obviously through the summer, with the decrease in cases and things looking better and the better weather, things started to ramp up, and we really felt like there was a high possibility of us having a full 26 team season in the ECHL. And then as we started, to get deeper into the summer, into the fall, started the restrictions in different regions, especially in Canada, weren't loosening up as much as we hoped. And then obviously when the cases started to spike again, that's kind of where we got to, thinking of contingency plans. And I will give it to every team that's opted out so far. So 6 teams from our division and 2 other ones, so 8 total. And I do assume that there's going to be more to come. But every team, every president, every member of every staff did everything they could to make sure that they gave their team the best chance to play. But when we got to a point where we knew personally as an organization that the borders likely weren't going to open until the majority of people in both Canada and the United States were vaccinated, when we knew that we weren't going to be allowed, enough people in our building to even have one team take the ice, let alone 2 teams and officials and game officials, and definitely not fans, it just wasn't feasible anymore for us to hold hope out for a season and also hold any players back from playing elsewhere. So it's been a long process, a lot of conversations, league calls, conversations between our president, myself, and me and the players. It's been tough, but ultimately it was a decision that we felt was inevitable. So we made it in a time that gave us an opportunity to get, focused on next season, and also gave our players an opportunity to potentially find other places to stay active this season.
What goes into making a decision like this? Like I know that these are unprecedented times, and you're probably having to take these phone calls that you never thought in your life that you would have to be on. So when considering not playing hockey for a season, that's a major decision, obviously. So is it ticket revenue? Is it player safety? Like, was there one deciding factor that made these teams say it's just not in our best interest to play this year?
Yeah, you know what? It was so fluid and it changed every day because, the main focus on one call was player safety, and the next one was travel, and the next one was restrictions per region, and the next one is just, revenue with fans. And we're a league that needs the fans, needs the revenue. That's all that we get through. A lot of teams actually lose money per year, but how much money are they willing to lose? And if they played without fans, it'd just be too much for a lot of the owners in our league. So there were a lot of factors, and some days it felt like it was just one. But we got into a situation as a league and as teams where we put out one fire, another one started, and I think that's when it started to become more realistic that a season for a lot of teams was, likely not to come to fruition for us this year. Because it was too hard to get all those different factors into one basket and make sure they were covered. And they tried their hardest, but it wasn't. So, that's there was not one pinpointed factor that ultimately kind of pulled the trigger on the season. It was just all those going on at once and continuously trying to find a solution to all of them. And then once you figured one out, the next one would happen. Another rollback on restrictions in Ontario, or curfew in Ohio, and you just couldn't control it because it was just so many states and provinces and then federal regulations that it was out of our hands. So as firm believers, especially people who work in sports or in coaching, we always talk about control what you can control. We preach that to our players. We preach it to each other, and we just couldn't control a lot of those factors. So what we could control at the end was the decision to adjust our focus into a healthier, more viable 21-22 season. And we're excited to get there. It seems like it's ages away, but that was ultimately what made our decision happen.
Are you optimistic about getting back on the ice for 2022?
I am. There's a lot of great news. Obviously, they're starting some trials with rapid testing in Alberta, and I know they've talked lots about getting them into the airports and the borders here in Ontario. And obviously, the news about the vaccine over the last several weeks has been really exciting. So yeah, I'm pretty optimistic. Like, we built a really solid team. We lost some players to retirement on the ECHL level. Um, Mainly because of COVID, but we replaced them with some really good ECHL contracts that we were excited about. We knew we were going to get some good help from Ottawa and Belleville, so we were always excited about the talent that we get down from there that we have a hand in developing. We knew we were going to get a great young goaltender in Kevin Mandolese, so we were really excited about that. So we know that we had a good team going into this year, and thankfully we can retain their rights into the off-season process for next year. And we know that the Ottawa Senators are clearly a young team with a lot of prospects, a lot of draft picks. So we know that we're going to see some guys down the road. So we're confident that not just in 21-22, but seasons to follow, that we're going to be pretty well stacked as an organization. And it's our job to coach them and have that success. But definitely confident in the season. But what I will say for coaches and players alike, whether they played in a shortened season this year, or we, for whatever reason, we had to stay at home and didn't get to be on the ice, it really will test how much people want it, coaches and players. We will see who's prepared in 21-22 because it's an extended time off and your brain can go 1,000 different directions. So we'll see which players are ready to go and which coaches are prepared to lead their team to success. And I'm excited to take that challenge on for 21-22.
So specifically, what's going to become of the players that were supposed to be on your roster this year? I know there are mentions of some kind of free agency. Is it going to be like a one-year loan type situation? Are there going to be guys who go to other teams and guys who just sit out the year? Explain, if you can, how that's going to work in terms of player movement, and are you going to get those guys back in 2022?
Yeah, I mean, a lot is still being discussed and figured out at the ECHL level, and that's with the presidents and governors and the management of our league. But my understanding right now is um, it's kind of like a 1 year loan. Now at the ECHL level, those contracts are 1 year contracts, and in any given season, in a regular season, at the end of the year, you have to submit your season-ending roster. So that includes 20 players, and out of those 20, you have about a month and a half to negotiate new contracts with those 20. So you try and sign as many as you can, or at least the guys you want to bring back. And then after that time period, I think it's at the end of June in a regular year, um, as out of all the guys you haven't signed yet that you weren't able to reach terms with, you're allowed to qualify 8. So when you qualify those 8, then their rights remain with you for the entire year. Anyone else that you didn't sign or qualify at that point becomes a free agent. So my understanding is, in spite of us not playing, that whole process will be normal. So at the end of the ECHL season, wherever our guys that we sign go and play, they could play for one of our rivals for all we care. But at the end of the year, those players will be eligible to be on our 20-man season-ending roster. I'll have that time period to try and re-sign them. And at the end of that time period, then I'll be able to qualify those 8 guys and keep their rights, and so on and so on. So that's what we are believing right now. There is some details that they need to iron out still at the league level, but I think that's the direction it's going, to make sure that no teams have to kind of completely hit a reset button, because then you're going to have half the league. It's kind of like an expansion team at that point, and that's not what the league wants. So we're confident we're going to see a lot of the guys we signed this offseason back on the ECHL contract level.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're confident that you're going to have your core that you've built around back for 2022, correct?
Yeah, of course. And there's lots of factors that might happen. Some of those guys are a little bit older, so a couple guys might retire, or some guys might flee back over to Europe. Some guys may not play, so we might have to evaluate where they're at with their game this year. I know a couple of our guys have already signed with other ECHL teams. So, one thing I have told in our last team meeting that we had over Zoom, I just said, look, no one's going to be, heavily judged over what happens this year. It's always a privilege to play this game, but this year it's especially a privilege. There's less jobs, there's less opportunities. Some teams will start and then probably have to, close up operations. You've seen it in Europe. You'll see it here in North America as well. So no one can really be judged. So what I've told our guys is I'm going to honor their contracts for next year if they want to come back. I'm not going to judge them on where they played if they didn't play. Some guys might end up in the SPHL or the Federal League if they're playing. You can't look at them and be like, they were an ECH or a SPHL player last year, they can't be with us. Like, if they can get on the ice and play at a competitive level, they'll be really fortunate this year. So our plan is to stick with the roster that we built, because we know it's a good one, and I'm very confident that we'll have the majority of them back at least. There's always factors that'll pop up, that you can't control.
You have had a hell of a first season behind the bench in Brampton. Your campaign obviously got truncated by the COVID-19 pandemic, and now your second season has been wiped out entirely. How difficult is it to deal with these types of challenges?
Yeah, it is. Like, anyone who says that it's not hard and it's, you don't get down yourself is probably not being completely honest. I think it's important to acknowledge that things are tough. It's important to acknowledge that, things happen, you don't know how to react to them. And it's okay. I used to have a professor that used to tell me it's okay to visit, Pityville for, a little while. But, don't break ground and build a foundation there. That's what he used to always tell me. So you can visit, but just make sure it's a short-lived visit and get out. So, there's been times that I've been really frustrated, really upset. We had a really good team. We did some great things this past year. We beat the best teams in the league. We consider ourselves a top 5 team in the league in 1920, and we were poised for a really good run in the playoffs. And we had an outstanding season statistically. And we were really happy with where we were. So to get that pulled from underneath you, it's really frustrating, and it makes you sad, and made the players sad. And then all the uncertainty through the offseason, building a team, but not being able to give guys clear-cut answers, especially when we're a coaching staff, myself and Duncan Dalmeo, that prides ourselves on communication and transparency. But we just couldn't give answers to questions that the guys wanted to ask. So very frustrating. But again, to bring it back to what I said earlier on, is you just can control what you can control. So, you redirect your focus to different things. There have been a lot of educational opportunities for coaches this summer. There's been lots of opportunities for guys to find things as players that they can really key in on, focus on, because they got more time to train, to skate, more individual time with coaches because the restrictions brought them down to 5 to 10 players on the ice. So you can always flip everything to a positive. And yes, sometimes it's extremely annoying to be around those people that always do that, but you have to bring yourself back to that, because like I said, when the time goes to drop the puck, there's going to be no excuses. We all are in the same boat. We've all faced this together. So if you're not ready to go when that time comes, it's your fault. So that's kind of been my messaging to our players, and my self mantra as well. I got to be as ready as possible. So we've educated ourselves as much as we can. We get on these Zoom calls with other coaches. We're with the NHL Coaches Clinic, the NHL Coaches Association Mentorship Program. There's so much to fill your time with. You just got to make sure it's not, sitting on the couch feeling pity for what's happening. So that's been my approach to this, but it's definitely been frustrating and tiresome a lot of moments during this off season.
And further to that, what are some of the ways that you've been preparing for 2022? Is it just going to be a year for you spent in the film room? Are you going to be doing more scouting? Or is it one of those things where you kind of can't even do much preparation? You have to wait this thing out. Like what is this season without a team to coach going to look like for you?
Yeah, I think there's different ways to look at it. So Brampton Beast wise, I could obviously watch a lot of film, keep tabs on our guys. I think for me as a coach, the biggest thing is communication relationships. That's what I've always keyed in on. Yeah, X's and O's and video and analysis are extremely important. I mean, you can't get ahead without them. But the relationships and the communication that you have with players and people in the game is what keeps you kind of in front of it. So I'm going to have an opportunity now to communicate with a lot of people, our own players, see what they're doing, whether they're playing or not, see how they're feeling, see where their bodies are at, their mental state is at. There's video available if we can do some video sessions with them or anything like that. But I could also watch the guys who are playing and just watch a ton of hockey. Like the NHL will get started, so there'll be lots of hockey for me to watch. There's international hockey that I can key into and get some new concepts from. So there's a lot I can do from a Brampton Beast standpoint to make sure that the Beasts are ready. I can watch video of Ottawa Senators prospects that I think that we might see, so I can get to know them and be prepared for what they might bring to us and what I can do better for them to make sure they're not with us for a long time, that they're up in Belleville and eventually up in Ottawa. There's lots I can do on that end. Me personally, the announcement's still pretty fresh. It's just about a week old. So, but I've thought of some things I can do as well. There's still potentially some opportunities for me to stay active. I know I'll be with the Brampton Beast in 21, 22. I know that the job is mine. But I can, hopefully maybe latch on somewhere, whether if the OHL gets started, if there's an Ontario League team that needs an extra set of hands and eyes, maybe I can help out. If the American League gets started, maybe I can talk to the guys in Belleville and see if there's a way I can help, whether it's a scouting, an analytics, or, whether I can go out and help with their Black Aces if they have expanded rosters this year, since we're not going to be there for them to send guys down. Maybe there's something to do. And these aren't conversations I've had yet, but I've definitely, the wheels have started turning on how I can stay active and sharp as well. So there's lots of avenues. You just got to go out and find them and be as ready as possible.
The ECHL, it's such a unique league, and it, of course, has its own reputation. But I think people do probably have a lot of misconceptions about it, and I'm sure you could speak further to that. So, what are the things that you've heard about the ECHL that people think of the league that maybe they're wrong about, and maybe it's kind of better hockey than people give it credit for?
Yeah, I mean, like growing up and playing myself, anytime I heard about the ECHL, it was a fight league back then. So when I was coming up through AAA and junior, even when I was in college, it was a league that had a lot of fights, a lot of meatheads, a lot of just just crazy things that are unexplainable in the game. But it's come a long way. The leadership of our league, commissioner, the director of operations, Ryan Creelan, Joe Ernst, Dan Petrino, Joe Babick. Like these are all guys that work extremely hard to, bring a lot of credibility to the league. I think the affiliations with NHL teams has really boosted it. Every team in our league but one had an affiliation this past season. And a lot of really good players, especially goaltenders, come through our league. And it's something that has really grown the ECHL to another level. So, one misconception is it's not a fight league anymore. Like especially in the North Division in truer hockey markets, like it's some great hockey. It's fast. It's high tempo. High scoring at times, but great defensive and goaltending as well. It's just an all around great hockey game. There's some misconceptions of how players and coaches are treated. In fact, when I was a head coach at the University of Lethbridge, I read a Toronto Star article about the Brampton Beast. And, I don't know the writer, so I don't know him personally or not going to accuse him of anything, but he talked about this experience. He went on a road trip on the bus and how it was pretty much hell. Like it was, the guys weren't treated well. They weren't eating. And I think it was a really unfair article, and being a head coach at the university level, then I was like, man, I'll never coach in that league. I kind of took it at face value, but obviously that I got an opportunity. I came in, I wanted to be a pro head coach, and it's nothing like that at all. Like, we're treated really well. We eat really well. We have a nice sleeper bus that's comfortable, and we get our sleep in. And yeah, we're busing, we're not flying, so that's not always glorious, but we're always safe. We're always happy, and the camaraderie that takes place on that bus is like nothing else. So it's not hell. It's actually a really cool experience that I think any hockey player that gets to be part of that is very lucky. So those are some of the misconceptions, but it's great hockey. These guys aren't done. They're always working for something. And yeah, will the majority of them ever play in the NHL? No, they won't, because the majority of people generally don't play in the NHL. But these guys will carve out some really great careers. You see some of these guys end up in Europe and they get paid a boatload, and their bodies last longer when they get over there. They can play until they're into their 40s. So these guys are striving for something. They're not at a dead end. They're striving for something here, and that's what makes it really great hockey.
You're in a unique position as a younger coach who's been able to coach all over the place. Like you mentioned, you coached in the Canadian university circuit. You've coached internationally. You won a Calder Cup with Grand Rapids. How does the development approach differ? I guess speaking more to the pro side, in terms of from the ECHL to the AHL, is there a difference in player development, or is it kind of the same uniform type of thing?
Well, the two major differences between the ECHL and AHL is obviously one, resources. We're a staff of two coaches. We don't, in our team at least, we don't have a video coach, so we don't have kind of live logging during games. Not a lot of analytic information that we can give in real time. Like, we do our best as two guys to give it by the next day. But in between periods, like we're rewinding, fast forwarding, trying to find clips and pull guys in if there's an adjustment that needs to be made. So resources is one major difference. But it's our job to do our best to provide our guys everything that they need. The second thing is it's a little bit more fast changing in the ECHL in terms of so many call ups and so many games and so little nights. So we'll play 5 games in 3 different cities and 7 nights a lot of times. So, we probably don't have as much time to key in on certain things in certain periods of the season where we're just kind of go, 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 go. So we really rely a lot on video, on, just conversations, like I mentioned, communication and transparency and relationships. That kind of stuff happens on the bus, that you go sit down next to a player and you talk about a certain situation, because we don't have as much time, and we don't have development coaches come in as often. When I worked in Grand Rapids, we'd have, Yuri Fisher would come down, and Chris Draper would come down, and Chris Chelios would come down. And there's always someone new working with different pockets of players, where at our level, it's just Duncan and I, and we got to do the best we can. And sometimes it's not even on the ice. It's in our office or on the bus or in a hotel room. So those are the big resources, and just time are the biggest differences, because we pack in so many games in so little time in the ECHL, and there's so much turnover in our roster. It's crazy, and we're affected by everything. It's unbelievable that we could be sitting, after our game in a bar watching the Ottawa Senators versus the Montreal Canadiens playing, or whoever they're playing, and you see a forward that has absolutely nothing to do with the Brampton Beast go down, but the hair on our arm starts to stand up because we know the trickle effect's going to happen. And that's great, because somebody gets an opportunity. So we're not nervous about something, someone leaving us because we want them to be held back. But now we know that we got to start making decisions on how we're going to react to that domino effect. So it's a really unique level for sure because of that. So we're affected by literally every single thing that happens at each level, NHL, AHL, and in our level. The slightest little transaction then can turn everything upside down. So those are the biggest differences: the ever-changing, fast-paced nature, and just the resources that we have to work with.
One of those guys who did spend time with you down in Brampton and then eventually moved up to Belleville was Joey Daccord. He spent 12 games with Brampton, 7.5 record, goals against average of 2.85 and 901. Those are those are somewhat unremarkable numbers on the surface. But he went up to Belleville and he put on a clinic. And for a lot of people's money, he was one of the better goaltenders in the AHL. What contributed to him getting that call up, and why do you think he boasted better numbers in the AHL? Why do you think those stats on the surface might be a bit deceptive?
Yeah, well, the ECHL is a great kind of growing ground for goaltenders. There's a lot more breakdowns. We play with less forwards. We only dress 10 forwards, so there's a little bit more fatigue, and we have a lot more of those back-to-backs and 3 games and 3 nights. And that term 3 games and 3 nights is actually false. Like, we'll play our first game Friday night at 7:30 p.m. and our third game at 1 p.m. on Sunday. So if you do the math, you're actually playing 3 games in almost 2 days. So and then a lot of times it's in 3 different cities. So there's a lot more breakdowns, not to the pleasure of the coaches, but a lot more breakdowns. So that really stretches a goalie to react quicker, analyze and read the play a lot faster and be ready for anything. And a lot of shots, a lot of rubber. And because I mentioned the crazy turnover in our league, a lot of different guys playing in front of you. You could have a whole different Daccord on one night to the next night. And you could have a guy from the SPHL playing in front of you. So it really stretches a goalie and forces them to mature real quickly. Naturally, though, that kind of a lot of times lead to a different set of numbers. And when you look at them at face value, they don't look as great. But if you're in the 2.5 to 2.88 range and anywhere over 90%, you're having a pretty decent year in this league. I think the wins and losses mean a lot in this league because you can really steal wins, and your numbers, your statistics for that night might not be that great, but you're making those big saves when they count, or you're winning that OT game or that shootout game. So it's a little bit different statistically for a goalie in our league. And also Joey was a young goalie playing his first pro games. We know he had one under his belt with Ottawa after he left ASU, but these were his first pro games as a starter that we leaned on. And he got off to a little bit of a rough start, but man, like, you just knew right away that he was going to figure it out. And the biggest thing that helped him was his confidence and his acceptance of his role with the Brampton Beast. Like, he was fully accepting of being with us for the 72 game Holland playoffs. That was his goal. He came in, we did everything we could to provide him everything we can. We showed a lot of confidence in him. We told him, look, we're going to ride you a lot in certain parts of the season. And he was all in on that. He's like, I want to win here with the Brampton Beast. And that was the plan. But what gave him an opportunity, obviously, and this is typical for a lot of players, was an injury. Nilsson got a concussion. Anderson was in and out with an injury for a period of time. Hogberg got called up, and then the dominoes fall. But what got him to stick there was his performance and his willingness to continue learning and continue competing no matter where he was playing. So he went up and he was great. And, we were really thrilled for him. And then he came back for one game against Reading. It was his last game against Reading, and he was outstanding. It was his best game of the year. And at that point, we had been told that he's going to be with us for a little while longer. And lo and behold, another injury happens. And, he left that night and we're like, man, we're never going to see this guy again, because he had reached a level where he was ready to play in the American League consistently. And his confidence was a big piece of that. But Ottawa did a fantastic job communicating with him. Like, as an ECHL coach, you get a little anxious about the conversations when a guy gets sent down from camp, right? Because you got to think, this guy played rookie tournament. He went to Ottawa's camp. He goes to Belleville's camp. So he's heard now 2 or 3 times that, all right, we're sending you down. We're sending you down. So now I'm here as an ECHL coach, and I've been a spectator at all these events. So I got to know him well from his game, but I'm meeting him for the first time, and I'm, trying to prepare myself to, what am I going to say to this guy? Because he's obviously facing a lot of disappointment. But Ottawa's done a fantastic job. I sat down with Joey, and I kind of had my whole spiel ready on how this is going to be great for him, and he was all in right away. He pretty much told me, like, Coach, you don't have to give me this, this elevator speech right now. He's like, I'm ready. Like, we're going to win. We're going to do great. I need you to be patient with me. I need you to help me. So he kind of dictated it, and I thought this was fantastic. So it says a lot about the kid, about the player, but it also says a lot about the Ottawa Senators organization. Like, they were clear and concise with him that he'd be with us. Pierre Gruel, Corey Cooper, they communicated that with him, and they kind of laid the expectations out on the table. So it made our job a lot easier, and I think it really helped him grow a lot faster, and that's what we saw out of him when he eventually got to Belleville.
Yeah, every time I talk to somebody about Joey, that's the confidence thing always comes up. That seems to be his trademark.
Yeah, it can rub some people the wrong way, for sure. Yeah. That was a little challenge for us as a coaching staff to get him to harness that. use it the right way. But yeah, it's definitely follows him everywhere he goes.
I think it's a big reason why the consensus among the fan base, they have him pegged as the goaltender of the future in Ottawa. And I think there are some indications from the Senators organization, not that I want to put words in anybody's mouth, that they feel somewhat the same way. Would you agree with that kind of projection for him? Do you think he has that type of potential?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak to the Ottawa Senators' plan. I've been privy to some information on terms of development and what they see in the future. But one thing I will say, just specific to Joey Daccord, he will be an NHL goaltender. Whether it's with Ottawa or someone else, he will be an NHL goaltender. And just his work ethic, his background, his confidence, his swagger, like what a teammate too. Like some of the best things I saw out of him as a person was when he was backing up, the excitement level he brought, the how he got engaged in the game, the things he'd say to the opposing players, like it was unbelievable. And it really sparked us early on. Like we in November we had like a 9-2 month, and I think he may have won only 4 of those games of the 9-2 month, but just the impact he had as a teammate in the room and on the bench. I just saw such great things in him, and I'm really proud to have been a small part of his kind of introduction to pro hockey, and to be able to see that, because it just really made me a believer in him. So to answer your question, I can't say exactly about a Senators jersey. We certainly hope so, but he will be an NHL goaltender. I truly believe that.
Another goalie that's generated a ton of buzz this year is Kevin Mandolese, who we touched on a little earlier. He was obviously on track to join you in Brampton for this season. It was something that Pierre Groulx spoke openly about. Have you had any contact with him, and what are your impressions of him so far? Because obviously he spent last year in Quebec. Like Joey, this would be his first year playing pro hockey. So yeah, have you had any contact with the player, and do you have any kind of initial impressions of him?
I haven't had any personal contact or conversations with him directly. I was at rookie tournament last year and at Belleville's training camp, but I think he was reassigned back to the queue by the time we hit training camp. So I saw him in some action, some practice action and game action at a rookie tournament. Other than a passing hello, we haven't had much conversation. I've talked to Pierre a lot about him. We were kind of crafting a plan for him about games that he would see, how much we'd lean on him, different points of the season where we'd be expecting him to peak and him to take over a number one role. But in terms of personal contact, we kind of saved that. It probably would have happened by now in any regular year, obviously, because we would have been playing. But we kind of save it because we want these guys in the mentality of they're doing everything they can to make it, even though there's been a clear cut plan and development plan put in front of them. We want them to come to Ottawa Senators training camp, giving their best effort, putting that forward, and then Belleville and rookie tournament, and the same thing at all levels. So I don't want to cloud him with too much of worrying about the Brampton Beast until he has to. So most of my communication is through Pierre Groulx and the Belleville staff in terms of how we're going to handle a player like him. And then as we got closer, it probably would have been more of an in-person communication then. Like when I'd be at any Belleville events for training camp or anything like that, that's where I'd start to kind of break the ice with him and build a rapport with him. And unfortunately, that didn't happen. And I don't know what it's going to look like moving forward from there, but no direct contact. But I've heard he's such a competitor. I heard he loves pressure. He loves taking teams on his back. He loves being the guy. He loves making big saves. He's a big body goaltender that can block a lot of shots without moving too much. He's just excited to play hockey. That's what I've heard about him. He was really excited to be in Brampton, which again, going back to that conversation I was trying to amp myself up to having with Joey, I think that says a lot about him, but also about Pierre Groulx and Pierre Dorian, and just laying out a clear-cut plan and pathway for him makes my job a lot easier. So I was really excited to see how excitable and game ready he was, and unfortunately that's been put on hold. But that's kind of everything I know about him.
Yeah, I had the chance to speak with him for an interview for Silver Seven Sens in the spring, and he's a phenomenal person to talk with. He spoke a lot about how actually using a sports psychology approach really helped his confidence. And he found that that was something that really helped turn his game around. He did have the breakout year this year, or the bounce back year, I guess I should say. In terms of talent, and I know it's difficult because you haven't got him on the ice for camp. There was no Sens development camp or rookie camp or anything like that this year. Did you have expectations for him going into day one in Brampton if he ended up coming down to you? Like, is this a kid you're pegging as your day one starter? Or is it one of those things where you kind of have to see it first?
Yeah, I mean it's a really delicate situation, especially with a 20-year-old, right? They come in. Joey was different. He was young and he went through a learning period, but he was 24 years old, right? And so it's a different body, different mindset. 20-year-old is going to be a little bit, even more challenging. So we had a lot of conversations with Pierre and Corey Cooper at the time before he left to join the Kingston Frontenacs of how we are going to handle it. So there was no clear expectation for him to be number one right away. And a lot of things that fans may not know is there's a lot of emphasis in other things like who else are they going to sign? The Belleville Senators were really impressed with Alex Dubois. He was signed to a two-way American League contract with us last year as a rookie, but he was older. He played in the CIS, so he was 25, 26 years old. So although he was a rookie with Joey, he really took Joey under his wing. He had won championships in the QMJHL and in the CIS, so he knew how to win. And he was just very eager to do whatever it took. So Dubois was really great for Joey. They lived together. They pushed each other. They challenged each other. There was one point where Alex had more wins than Joey, and in face value was a better goaltender in performance-wise, numbers, wins, just confidence-wise. So I think the Belleville Senators really like that. And Alex actually had an opportunity to come up and play 3 games with the Belleville Sens at the end of last season. He performed well. So in talking with management in Ottawa and in Belleville, we all had agreed that maybe Dubois was going to be a great option because he has QMJHL experience. He trains with a lot of guys that Kevin does as well. So this is going to be a really important role for Alex. And I talked to Alex in the offseason. I said, hey, if this comes to fruition, you're not a rookie anymore. I know you're only a second-year player, but this is a serious veteran responsibility. You're going to have a young 20-year-old coming here. You're going to live with him. He's going to lean on you. You got to push him, but you're also going to have to know that there's going to be times he gets to start that maybe you should have got the start, but we need to get this guy in games. And Alex, it never came to fruition. They never got around to signing Alex or another goaltender because obviously of everything that's been going on. But that's the thought process that goes into the development of a Kevin Mandolese. You can't just worry about him. You got to worry about who his tandem mate's going to be. And then you talk about how much you're going to push him. So, we talked about, probably going 50-50 split off the bat. Then you start to push him and test him on some back-to-backs. And then it's some other things like, make them uncomfortable. I remember one weekend, we were playing 3 games in 3 nights, I believe. We were in Worcester, Massachusetts, and then we were in Portland, Maine, and then we were home on a Sunday in Brampton. So that's a lot of travel, and it's tough. And as much as you'd love to play Joey Daccord in Worcester, Massachusetts, because it's as close as he gets to his hometown, we made the decision we're going to play him in Portland and we're going to play him in Brampton because he hadn't played a back-to-back yet. And we knew on Sunday the Ottawa Senators staff was going to come watch him. So we had those conversations with them as well. Like, we need to see how he performs in this situation. So it's those little decisions that go along the way, right? So it's about winning for us. We want to win, but a lot of times we know that we have a secondary job of getting these guys prepared. Yeah, we had those conversations, and we talked about Kevin starting 50-50 with Alex and, trying to outline when we're going to play him on some back-to-backs and road games versus home games and when, the Ottawa brass is going to be in town to watch him. So there is a lot of that, but as long as there's clear-cut communication, it's never an issue. It's never an issue. And Ottawa has been great with that, and we do our part to be great with that with the players as well.
What becomes of a player like that in a season like this? Because, I think it's fair to say that Kevin Mandolese is not just another ECHL player. He's a player that the Senators, I think, clearly have an affinity for. They drafted him for a reason, and they were really happy with the season that he had this year. Is there thoughts of maybe not sending him to play elsewhere for a year and maybe having him sit the year out, or is it one of those things where he's kind of free to do what he wants?
Yeah, I'm not privy to that information. I think that's a lot of conversation between the agent, the player, family, and obviously the organization. But if you're asking me for personal opinion, I think it's important to play for a goalie like him. So he's got eligibility to go back to the queue. I don't know if that's an option on the table. I haven't heard, so don't twist it into this as a rumor or anything like that. It's just
Of
me
course, of course.
as me as a hockey guy. I know he's got eligibility in the queue, and that's a league that's currently playing. So maybe it's an option. Maybe they carry 3 in Belleville when they get going, but is he going to be seeing the pucks and the shots that he would see with us? Because that's why they would have sent him to us anyway. Yes, there's a positive. He gets to be with the development coach every single day, but he's not seeing that game action, those breakdowns, those odd man rushes, those back-to-backs like we talked about, and playing after a 14-hour bus ride. So I don't know, but there are options, and there's, again, like we talked about when we were generalizing everything early on, is you can make a positive out of anything. If he's a third goalie in Belleville and only plays a handful of games, well, he's developing and he's working on his technique and his skills, and he's getting to watch some really good guys do it in front of him, and Joey Daccord and Gustafson or Hogberg or whoever ends up there. And if he goes back to the queue, he's in a comfortable setting where he knows he can dominate. And so there's lots of options, but I do think it's important for him to keep working. And if he can get some game action, I think that'd be beneficial. But that's just a personal experience. And there's ECHL teams that are playing. Currently he can be reassigned to any ECHL team. So maybe that's an option as well. And obviously we know that some guys have been sent over to Europe too. So, I'd wager that they're going to do the best thing for him, because the Senators have done a lot to develop their young talent, and they don't turn any stone. So that's one thing I know for sure. Wherever he ends up, it's going to be something that's going to be really good for him, and he'll be ready to go when it's time.
Spiros, thank you for coming on today. I've just got a couple more questions here before I let you go. Friend of the show, Sens Prospects, who's on every social media platform as Sens Prospects. Really a great source for everything in terms of players within the Senators systems. He manages to keep tabs on everybody somehow. For those of you listening who aren't familiar with him, he's been on the show a few times. He's fantastic. Definitely go check him out. He asked me personally to get your thoughts on TJ Melanson, the big defenseman. He said that he saw him at the Sens Dev Camp a few years ago, and he looked good. Thought he looked good, but obviously he hasn't really been heard from since in terms of the Senators system. Do you have any thoughts on the player?
Yeah, I mean, I love TJ for, a lot of different reasons other than just his playing style. Like he's a great human being, great teammate, great kid. I coached against him, so I know he was with development camp a number of years ago with Belleville, and I think he played a couple games, and then he was in rookie tournament and development camp with Belleville this past season before joining us. But I coached against him when I was in South Carolina. I coached against him when he was in Norfolk, and then Norfolk had a very poor season that year, but I thought TJ was just such a defensive liability. I was like, man, I am never gonna have that kid on my team. And it's funny because when you say stuff like that, it always comes around coming
Yeah.
back. I get the job with the Brampton Beast, and there's one player signed when I got the job. When I was announced on July 10th, there was one player on contract, and that was TJ Melanson. And I'm like, oh. And I go to Duncan Delmeo, our assistant coach, and I'm like, we got a project on our hands with this kid. And now I knew his offensive ability, but I'll tell you what, different setting, maybe different coaching, different development path. He had a fantastic year in 1920. He faced a little bit of an injury, would put him out for a little while, but he was our all-star. He was our all-star representative. He's one of the best power play specialists in the league. Super, just excited, loves the game. He's playing in Slovakia currently for HK Zvolen, or I don't know how to pronounce it, but out there, and he's doing pretty well. You know what? A guy like him, he is a power play specialist and a guy that's an offensive threat. And a lot of times those guys, they just don't get the break, or it takes a little longer for them to get the break because, when they get called up, they have to play that role, right? Where a lot of times, we had Chris Martinet called up to Belleville from our team just off of PTO. And, he played when he played for Belleville, he played, a number 6 role, big shutdown guy. good stick and very simple. Well, TJ is more than that, right? He's dynamic. He jumps up in the rush. He'll throw a spinorama in the neutral zone. He'll take guys on one-on-one, and he'll quarterback the power play. And it's as great as that sounds, it's difficult for those guys to get an opportunity, because typically when you're in a pinch and you need a guy, you just need a guy to be as safe as possible. So while I feel for him, he's carving out a good career for himself. He's making some decent money out in Slovakia, and I think he's a guy that can come back and be a full-time AHLer eventually, but he's just got to prove himself to someone that's willing to give him that opportunity to be that dynamic defenseman, not just a guy that's called up just to be safe for a night. Because when that's happened for him, I don't think it's worked out, because he's out of his element and he's not playing his game. But super guy, super player as well.
Sens prospects will thank you for the tip about Slovakia, because no matter where he is, he'll track him down and he'll find video of him.
Great.
I love the way you spoke to a player that fans may not be familiar with. If you had, Senators fans are insane, God love them. They know everything about all their prospects, and they get irrationally excited about so many of them. Who are some players in the ECHL that Sens fans may not be as familiar with, but you're looking at them going, hey, like this kid could be a player for them?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots. Like it's crazy, because some of the guys that you don't even expect just kind of blow up at times. But we had a guy, and I know some Senators fans may be familiar with him because he played a number of games with Belleville this year. But we had Nathan Todd on our team, and again, he gets called up and he plays 4 or 5 minutes a game, and he's in a fourth line role. And he played a number of games with Belleville, and he actually played with Manitoba as well. And he scored 1 goal this year when he was with Manitoba against Belleville, funny enough. But but he's a guy that's just a pure scorer, really good centerman, can play the wing, can kill penalties, has a hard shot, off the flank on the power play. But it takes a guy like him a little bit of time. And he actually played, I think, 6 or 7 games when he came out of the OHL for Binghamton back when they were the Senators affiliate. So there's a slight connection to him, but he's one of those guys that you kind of see pops up here and there. And, I have a lot of confidence that if he gets a full AHL season under his belt, he's a guy that could make it and could, make a lot of noise. There was a ton of guys, when I coached in South Carolina, there was a guy, Grant Bessie, who was just an extreme talent. Now he's over in Germany, making a good career for himself there. But he had a handful of AHL games under his belt. And again, a lot of times it's just an opportunity being in the right place at the right time. But there's some really good players in our league. Going back even a couple more years, there was Justin Danforth. It was before I even got in the ECHL. There's a guy that came out, I think, at a Sacred Heart, or maybe it was Holy Cross, one of those schools. So a lower end school, not like a Power 5 school, went to Cincinnati, tore it up. And now he's one of the leading scorers I believe in the KHL. He was a leading scorer in the Finnish league. Now he's leading scorer in the KHL. So I can definitely see a guy like him coming back over and making it, to the AHL and maybe the NHL. And that's why these guys play. That's why our league exists, right? And that's why there is a misconception. Like, these guys aren't done. Like, they have goals. They have, things they want to do. And will they make it to the mountaintop? Maybe not. But, they're exceptional players that for one reason or another have to kind of simmer a little bit in our league and maybe take a different path. But there's a lot of players out there that I think are fantastic. So to pinpoint one guy right now is hard, but keep an eye on Nathan Todd. He's got a connection to the Ottawa Senators. He's been in their training camps. He's played a few games for their affiliates. He played a number of games with Manitoba last year, and he signed a 2-way deal with Manitoba this offseason. So if we had played, we still held on to his rights. So he would have split time between us and Manitoba, but let's see what happens this season. But he's a guy to keep an eye on. I have a lot of faith in him. He's a good, solid player.
Spiros Anastas, head coach of the Brampton Beast. It has been an absolute pleasure having you on, sir. Like I said, I know this has probably been an insane time of year for you, so I really do appreciate you making the time to speak to me and obviously to Sens fans at large. So thank you very much.
No, thanks for having me, and I look forward to following Ottawa this year and Belleville, and hopefully we're right back to it, developing players and being part of the mix for their development plan real shortly here.
I agree. I can't wait to have you guys back in the mix. Did you have any social medias or anything that you wanted to plug?
I do a lot of retweeting. I don't, and then anything I tweet personally is just about my kids or anything like that. So, but I am on Twitter and Instagram and LinkedIn and everything. But yeah, there's not many Spiros Anastases in hockey, so it's just Spiros underscore Anastas, and I'm sure I'll pop up. But it's not overly exciting. It's just a lot of retweeting of Ottawa Senators stuff and other sports stuff that I take an interest to. But yeah, I'm out there, so anyone can find me.
Fair enough. We'll give you a tag, and we'll share the people, and I'm sure the people will follow. Thank you again for coming on.
Awesome, thanks, Brandon.
Thank you to Spiros Anastas, head coach of the Brampton Beast, for what was an amazing interview. Gave you fine listeners some fantastic insight on the state of his franchise, as well as some of the key prospects within the Ottawa Senators system. Before we end the show today, we are going to go to another fan segment. You know him well. It is Mr. Steve on Sens from Twitter.com, and he is going to tell you and me about his favorite Ottawa Senators moments. Okay, joining me for this week's fan segment, you know him well. It is Steve on Sens. How are you, sir? Thank you for being on.
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm surviving, man. One day at a time, as everybody else is. So, Steven, like we were talking about before, and as we've done a few times on the show now, basically what I want to do is hear your favorite Ottawa Senators memory. It can be connected to anything, a piece of memorabilia, a game you went to. What's one of those moments that reminds you why you're a fan? And I'll let you take it from there.
If you don't mind, I might actually do a little bit of a curve here.
Please.
And throw it back to some bad vibes to start. I'll end with some better vibes, but
Sure thing.
I feel like this game doesn't get talked about a whole lot, mostly because it's terrible. And this is almost before my time, but I was actually at this game. I was 6 years old. It was February 2004 against the Leafs, which was the flu game. I don't know if you would remember this because we're about the same age range.
Yeah.
But Ottawa, Toronto, I guess height of Battle of Ontario, and Ottawa jumps out to a 4-0 lead, really early in the game. I think Alfredson scored 20 seconds in, something like that. And but then Hossa ends up getting, I think it was a high stick. There was blood everywhere on the ice, and then the entire team got the flu. Players were leaving the bench constantly, and then the Leafs came back and won the game 5-4. Sens had 7 skaters left on the bench. So yeah, that was a game that I have memories of being there, which is kind of weird considering, I was pretty young at the time. But that's a weird LCD sound system losing my edge. I was there at the flu game in 2004. So that's one that we will start off bad, and then I guess we'll go from there and get some better vibes. So yeah, that was a weird game to be at. Probably one of my best Sens memories, I would say. And there's a lot during the 2015 Hamburglar run. You could go with the Mark Stone again game against Pittsburgh. Go with a lot of games, but one that kind of stands out for me is the Sens Bruins, March 19, 2015. Sens and Bruins were battling for that last playoff spot. Bruins ended up selling playoff tickets before they actually clinched a spot, which was kind of fun.
That well, yeah.
But March 2015. So I was, and then there's some personal sentiment that goes along with this. So I was in grade 12 at the time, and every year at my high school, the grads, a bunch of people would go to Mont Tremblant for this ski vacation kind of thing. And so Sens Bruins, one of my best friends is a hardcore Bruins fan, and so we were all vaguely the age of consumption in Quebec, and so we all packed into a bar, sharing pictures for the first time watching hockey. So it was at the time the coolest thing ever, drinking beer and watching hockey. Wow. And the bar was a lot of Sens fans there because March break, pretty close to Ottawa, and that game was just wild. I don't know if you remember too closely, but like
I do, yeah.
right off the bat, you have tourists scoring 19 seconds into the game. They're also wearing the heritage jerseys, so that makes it that
Yeah,
much more fun,
yeah.
looking great. And it was just constant back and forth hockey. Like it was just such a fun game. You have McCulloch scoring his 200th goal. You get Legwan scoring from Eric Condra, and then having this weird like grinning celebration where he just kind of looks at the rest of the team. Ryan Spooner scored, which seemed to happen all the time against Ottawa during those years. And then Pajot scored like 15 seconds after that. And it ended with Stone passing to Turris for an empty netter. And like that was just like probably like some of the most fun I've had watching hockey, I think, up until that point. Just surrounded with friends and like that was just a phenomenal hockey game.
Yeah, the 2015 Hamburglar run, that's cool because I think that is high on everyone's list of best Senators moments, but it's not one we've heard about on the show yet when asking fans about it. You know, it's kind of revolved around that 2017 run and everything. Why do you think that is? You know, the Hamburglar run, it was obviously this magical time, but it ended kind of abruptly with that loss to the Canadiens in the first round. Why do you think the Hamburglar run endures more than, say, 2007 or any of those other teams that maybe had more playoff success?
Um, I think just because of how ridiculous it was the Sens were able to come back. Like that team, after McLean got fired, it just seemed so flat. Like they had missed the playoffs the year prior, and it didn't really seem like there was a whole lot going on. Spezza had just left, and all of a sudden, after Leonard goes down, this goalie who I remember seeing highlights on Twitter of his previous game in Binghamton, he had led in like 3 goals in the first like I don't know what it was, 3-4 minutes. And I was like, all right, like this season's a wash. Maybe we'll get McDavid or Eichel. But they just completely turned it around, and there were so many highs and lows. Like I remember Hammond got injured that one game, and Chris Drieger had to come in. And they battled so much adversity. So that's definitely like just an incredible time as a Sens fan to look back on for sure.
Does the playoff, the way it ended in the playoff, does that dampen it all for you? Or is it one of those things that you're always going to be proud of regardless? Like for me personally, looking back on that time, it was so much fun to be a Sens fan. And those moments have kind of been few and far between in the last decade. I'm sure like 2017 was a fun time to be a Sens fan. 2015, the Hamburglar run was a fun time. Like does the playoff thing kind of ruin it all for you? Just to give people perspective who, either don't remember that run or who weren't fans during that run.
It definitely doesn't ruin it all for sure. I think there's a bit of a damper on it, especially considering how much bragging rights the Sens had after the 2013 playoff series against the Habs. But I don't think it ruins it at all. I think that's kind of that's why we're all watching sports, right? Like it's easy to say, it would have been nice if they had just lost the rest of the year, trade some players away. Maybe you get, a top 5 pick. But at the same time, that's not why we're watching sports. I think we watch for those crazy moments. You watch for those Mark Stone again moments. So it definitely doesn't ruin it at all. And I made the point, I think, on Twitter the other day. Maybe they get McDavid or Eichel, but also maybe they're picking 5th and we get Hanifin or something like that, and you don't get Shabbat. So it's easy to wish that things may have turned out better. But when you look back on it, that was just such a great, few months to be a Sens fan.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of putting it. Steve, man, really appreciate you coming on today. Where can the people find you? I'm sure everyone who listens to this follows you anyway, but for those who don't, why don't you plug your socials?
My Twitter at Steve on Sens. I'm kind of working on a new project, although school is kind of busy right now, but I'm trying to basically create a Sens wiki, just so you look back and have laughs about the various quotes, hilarious moments, because I think there's just been so much crazy stuff that's happened to this team over the past decade that I think we should kind of make a log of everything that's happened. So I'm slowly trying to work away at building that. I don't remember much HTML skills, but hopefully that'll be ready to go soon.
Man, I would love that. Just personally, I think that would be lots of fun. Yeah, thanks for coming on, man. Really appreciate you sharing your best memories, and we'll chat again soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you. Folks, that is going to do it for episode 44 of Internal Budget. Thank you to both Spiros Anastas and Steve Sens for joining the show today. It was a lot of fun, and I am really hoping that you enjoyed it as much as I did. Please make sure you like the podcast, share it with your friends, download, subscribe, rate 5 stars, all that fun stuff. Little things, but they go a long way, and they are really appreciated, especially during these dark days of COVID winter. Episode 45 is going to be coming at you next week. Until then, please make sure you stay healthy and stay safe, and we will see you then. Take care now.